Hello and welcome to Crowd Church, coming to you live from Liverpool this Sunday night. My name is Matt Edmundson, and whether this is your first time or whether you've been part of our journey since the beginning, it's brilliant to be with you. We are a community of people figuring out what it means to follow Jesus in real life. Not the polished, perfect version, but the messy, genuine, brilliant reality of this whole thing called Christianity. So let me give you a little roadmap of what's going to be happening over the next hour. We'll have a talk, lasts about 20 minutes, looking at the topic of relationships, which is the section of our series, Becoming Whole, that we are looking at, exploring how Christ makes us whole across every domain of life. After the talk, we've got Conversation Street. Oh yes, this is where we dig into what you've just heard, and you get to be part of that discussion. So if you're with us live, jump into the comments, share your questions, your thoughts and your stories. And of course, if you're watching on catch up or listening to the podcast, then thanks for being part of the crowd too. Right, let's meet your hosts and let's get started.
Well, hello and welcome to Crowd Church. My name's Sharon and I'm hosting tonight along with the fabulous Dan.
Hello.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Tonight we're part in a series to do with becoming whole, and we've been doing this for many, many weeks. And we're in a section about relationships at the moment. And tonight we have the fabulous Matt, I can say that, he's my husband, is actually going to be talking about marriage. So, Dan.
Yeah, this will be good, won't it? I'm looking forward to the tour. I'm looking forward to Conversation Street afterwards. So ask all your questions. We've actually got someone talking about marriage, and we've got the couple here. So
Yes,
we should get some good answers.
Yeah, yeah, it's potentially quite a tricky subject, I think, these days. But I've listened to the talk already. I've read the talk already, and it's got some just like really fabulous stuff in it. So what's going to happen is we're going to have Matt do the talk now, and then after that, me and Dan are going to chat about it and our thoughts. Matt's going to join in the conversation, but we also want you to join in the conversation. So do as he's talking, put your comments in the comment section, and we will try to pick up on those as we go along. So I will hand over to Matt.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And like Sharon said, we are talking about marriage tonight, and I'm doing that whilst my wife is here. So I have to be on my best behavior. And so a very, very warm welcome to you, Crowd Church. Great to be with you this evening. Is marriage outdated, or is it just misunderstood? That's the question that we are going to be looking at tonight. So let me start by asking you a simple question. What makes marriage different from actually living together? Good question, right? Now, early in my Christian walk, I couldn't actually explain why a piece of paper and a religious ceremony actually mattered, other than to say it was something sacred before God. That's probably about as far as I could get, right? Because deep down I thought maybe actually there wasn't that much difference between marriage and just living together. Maybe marriage is just a sort of an outdated institution. I don't know what you think too. Maybe it's something that we clung to out of habit, or maybe a sense of religious duty. Now, my parents divorced when I was young. I was about 9 years old. Dad moved out. I saw him every weekend and on Tuesdays. And I love both my parents. Both, they are wonderful people in so many ways. But neither was exactly a poster child for successful relationships for me growing up. And that's okay, So when someone challenged me about marriage, part of me thought, well, maybe marriage is actually just a really expensive party, for something that probably won't last anyway. But looking back, I can see that the problem isn't that marriage itself is broken, but my thinking about marriage was what was actually broken. So spoiler alert, fast forwarding all the way to the end, I do not think that marriage is outdated, to answer the question in tonight's title. But I do wonder if the problem is that we've forgotten what marriage actually is. And to be fair to my younger self, I wasn't the only one that thought the way that I did. In 1970, which I appreciate is going back a long time, 7 out of 10 adults were married in the UK. Today, it's 4 out of 10. And it's predicted that by 2050, only 3 out of 10 people will actually be married, right? So what's happening? Is it a case of we just don't like each other anymore? Maybe that's what's going on. I don't think it is. I think the reality has been actually there's been a shift from marriage to cohabitation, to living together without actually getting married. And that's increased by 144% in the last 30 years. I'm not going to give you too many stats tonight, but I find these stats quite interesting. So we've substituted marriage with living together, thinking, in essence, that they're probably the same thing, which is why the question, what makes marriage different from living together, a really, really interesting question for a Christian. The cultural message, I think, is pretty clear, right? Marriage is outdated, it's unnecessary, and actually, according to certain sectors of society, it's potentially harmful. I mean, why would you tie yourself down legally when you can just live together? Why make promises you might not be able to keep? And living together first, right, makes all the sense in the world. It's a bit like, if I can put it so crudely, test driving a car before you buy it, right? And I get it, I do. Growing up, marriage didn't look like something you'd want to sign up for. Like I said, my parents got divorced, and it kind of taught me that marriage ends, and that people fall out of love, and that promises get broken. As a teenager, I had no problem having more than one girlfriend at a time. It was almost like a competition, if I'm honest with you, between me and my mates. Another notch, another number. You know, the conquest became more important than the person. Not a great way to treat relationships. I was unkind, never really given myself to the other person, didn't trust them, and I cheated because that's what guys did, right? At least that's what I learned from the culture that was around me at the time. This was my broken thinking about marriage. It was my broken thinking about relationships. And when I first started going to church, I expected really to find more of the same, the same sort of broken relationships that I'd seen outside the church, just with religious people pretending maybe that they were fine. And of course, what I found in the church wasn't perfect, not by any stretch, but it was so very different from anything I'd seen before. Not only was everybody, it seemed, married, but actually, most of them seemed happy about it as well. They enjoyed each other's company. They laughed together, which just blew my mind. They went on dates. Who knew, right? They held hands in public and everything. And they were courteous to each other. More than that, they invited you into their homes where you could see the real life of their marriage. And you would see how they did disputes and how they did, falling out, and how they resolved that, and how they supported each other through difficult times. So yes, they had arguments, but they remained respectful. And the big one for me, which always spoke well to me, was that actually they always spoke well of their spouse, especially when their spouse wasn't there. You would never hear anyone badmouth or tell dirty jokes. So I started to see that marriage could be different, which is great. But to get there, God had to fix my broken thinking about relationships. And any good place to start when, you've got broken thinking is with the Bible, because it tells you what marriage is and what your responsibility as a husband or as a wife is, which is one of the reasons maybe culture doesn't like the idea of marriage because it actually carries this idea of responsibility, and not just responsibility on its own, but responsibility before God, which I appreciate. Neither of those things is a very popular idea. But in Genesis, right at the dawn of time, God gives us his original blueprint for marriage. It says in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 24, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So in this tiny verse, we learn three very powerful things about marriage, about biblical marriage, and what it is that we should really, really get our heads around. And so the first one is this. It says that they leave. Now, this isn't just about moving out of your parents' house, although that's part of it. Men, listen up especially. It's a fundamental shift where the marriage bond takes priority over all other human relationships. It is leaving your lifestyle of singleness. It is leaving your way of doing things. And practically even, it's about leaving gifts or love letters from your ex as well. It's about leaving this sort of unconscious expectation that you have of your future spouse. Even practical things. I don't know if you had this done. How you do Christmas.
That's a big one.
It's a big one, right? How do you do Christmas? Like with different traditions that you grew up with, your spouse grew up with, everyone's got expectations about Christmas. You are leaving all of that behind, and you're choosing to put your spouse first above family, friends, career, everything. And I think this idea of leaving is a revelation in and of itself, because so many people that I know get married wanting to keep one foot in their old way of living rather than leaving it. If we get the revelation about leaving, I think it would change our marriages. But it's not the only thing. It is the first thing. You leave, but it's not the only thing. So second, Genesis talks about holding fast. Hold fast to your wife. The Hebrew word means to stick like glue, which I think is a really good thing. To bond permanently, like super glue, like 5-minute epoxy resin, for those of you who work in wood. It's to just permanently bond, right? It's not a, let's see how it goes, or as long as we're happy. It is a deep, unbreakable. It's a deep, unbreakable covenant connection that encompasses emotional and spiritual and physical unity. If you hold fast, if you bond to your spouse, you don't need to have an emotional affair with another person. And men especially, listen, if you hold fast to your wife, you will not need to look at another woman, ever. And if you do, if you catch yourself doing that, remind yourself, hold fast to your wife, right? Now, in the Old Testament, there is a book written by a guy called Malachi, which is one of the coolest names on the planet. He was a prophet, and he wrote that the Lord was witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you have been faithless, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant. Some really strong language, some really choice words. God is a witness to how, men, listen, God is a witness to how you treat your wife. She is your partner and your companion by covenant. And God doesn't just see this as a human agreement, like some kind of contract. It's a sacred covenant with God, the creator of the universe, watching and participating and witnessing. And you have to hold fast to that. You've got to be committed, because this takes effort. It takes intentionality. You cannot be passive in your marriage, because if you are, I think You're going to head for danger, and you are going to get there very, very quickly. You have to hold fast to your spouse. Genesis also tells us beyond holding fast, beyond leaving, it talks about becoming one flesh. Now, one flesh. This is the mystery at the heart of marriage. Two separate people becoming one unified whole in every aspect of life, especially, but not solely, in the area of sex, which we are going to talk about a little bit. Because this was a massive barrier to Christianity for me personally for a long time. When I was 18 and driven and fueled by testosterone and cultural messaging, the idea that sex before marriage was wrong seemed completely outdated. I did not enjoy it, did not think it was right. To quote George Michael, that well-known sage of wisdom, sex is natural, sex is good, not everybody does it, but everybody should. And I was firmly in that school of thought, right? I was there. And so when I started going to church, when I was about 18 years old, there was this silver-haired preacher, an older guy, and it felt honestly like he talked about sex every single week. He could not get off the topic, it seemed. And I remember sitting there in church thinking there was something wrong with that dude, because he would talk about it as though it was an evil thing, as though something was wrong. And I didn't listen to him for months. I thought he was a bit of a nutter, I'm not going to lie. I thought the gospel thing, okay. And I remember praying in church, probably for the first time actually after hearing the gospel. And I remember saying to God, and I can picture where I was when I said this, God, I can believe all of this whole gospel thing, that Jesus came and died for me. Just do not ask me to stop having sex before marriage, because I'm not going to do it. And it was a real barrier for me. You know, how could something so natural be so wrong? But eventually, it took a little while, but eventually I came to a place of surrender when God knocked on the door of my heart. And that's where I gave that part of my life to him as well, every part of it. I didn't particularly enjoy the idea of doing that. I didn't think it was right. I'm not going to lie. But I knew that God had a better plan in this. And I just had to find out what that was. Now, I know some of you watching this are navigating complicated situations. Maybe you've recently come to faith and you're living with someone you love. Perhaps you've even bought a house together. Maybe your partner is not yet a Christian, but you are. They're still on their own faith journey. And I think there are real life situations that don't have simple answers, right? It's not as straightforward as me going, well, you should not do that, because I don't think that's actually right. And I'm not here to add guilt or pressure to you to make a hasty decision that might not make sense for you or your family. What I want you to hear is that God's design for marriage and sexuality isn't about limiting your life, though. It's about showing you something beautiful and something that's worth moving toward. When Jesus met people in complicated situations, he didn't condemn them. He just he showed them a better way, didn't he? And he gave them grace for the journey. So if you're in one of those situations, let me encourage you to do a couple of things. One, first, don't hide it from God. He knows about it. You can talk to him about it. You can pray without feeling condemned. He's not shocked by your circumstances. And I think sometimes we think something's wrong, so we just lock that away in our hearts, which is what I did for a little while. But actually talking to God about it and bringing it to God, I think is a perfectly sensible thing to do. The second thing, I would probably go and have some honest conversations with someone you know and trust and actually respect in the Lord, as in they are a good, solid Christian, have been a Christian for a while, and that can help you navigate what's going on. And third, remember that God's grace covers you whilst you're figuring all of this out. So if it's a complex situation, if you're in those situations, don't panic, don't worry. It's okay. Just enjoy the journey with God. Now, that said, if you are already a Christian or you were a Christian, a Christ follower, and then you started to have sex outside of marriage, I think that's a different situation, if I'm honest with you. And if I'm going to be totally straight because of time, I think that requires repentance because you're acting against what you know to be true, right? And I think that has complications on your marriage. It really does, and we'll come to that. But why? I mean, let's be real, right? Why is this a problem? What's it all about? Because, like I said, I had to definitely understand God. God would not spoil my fun. Surely it's okay if you love each other, right? Well, remember Malachi said that she is your companion and your wife by covenant. So marriage is a covenant, something we hold fast to. We leave everything else, we hold fast and covenant to our spouse, and we become one flesh. And I think even our biology is geared towards that. So we can see that sex is more than just physical pleasure. It is the ultimate covenant act, creating one flesh in the most intimate way possible. And I think when you understand that, casual sex becomes impossible because you're not just having fun. You understand from Scripture, you're making covenant promises to that person with your body that maybe your heart isn't ready to keep. And I think you're giving away part of yourself that was designed to bind you to one person, your spouse, for life. But why should I care? Why should I care what an ancient book says about relationships, right? Why should I leave? Why should I hold fast? Why should I hold the sacredness of becoming one flesh? Honestly, I think you do that because the principles actually work. Yes, you do. Now, the research actually validates this idea. This validates God's idea for marriage. Works in measurable ways. Like you're going to have 2 to 3 times higher satisfaction if you are a sexually exclusive couple. 50% lower divorce rates for those who prioritize their relationships. More marriages stay together if the couples don't live together before they get married, which is interesting, isn't it? Perhaps you can dismiss the source. Maybe you're not, into God. Maybe you think this is all a bit weird, Matt. I'm not going to lie. But you can't dismiss the outcomes. The principles of covenant marriage work. If you want a good marriage, God's way is definitely the best. So I don't think marriage is outdated. I think it's timeless, right? Now, early in my Christian walk, I had a tape series. Shows you how long ago it was. It was on tape. A tape series. If you don't know what a tape series is, or if you don't know what a tape was, ask your parents. And if they don't know, you're going to have to ask your grandparents. Sorry, it just is what it is. Now, I had 6 of these things, 6 tapes, 6 hours of teaching on the topic of covenants, right? And I wore those tapes plumb out. How much I listened to that message. I listened to it over and over again because I knew there was something I had to get from my head to my heart. There was something that God had in there. So I immersed myself in that topic. Remember, I had broken thinking. How do you resolve broken thinking? You get into the Bible. And for me, I looked at this topic all about covenant. And it was in that study that I stopped dating. I made this decision to stop dating in my early Christian life. I didn't put a time limit on it, but it ended up being a couple of years, which in itself is a bit of a miracle for me, I'm not going to lie. I took time to study the scriptures, like I said, on covenant, on marriage, on relationships, on this idea of sex. I studied it from cover to cover. And I wrote out all of these ideas that I'd gained over that brief time, and I put them in a little mini book. The first thing that I ever wrote down, really. So you can take a look at this for the cover design. A Guide to Dating, Sex and Marriage by Matthew Edmundson. Notice how graphically the M turns into the E there. That's awesome. I wrote this in 95. I know that because it says Frontline Church on the bottom. And that's when I worked for Frontline. So this is what I did. A couple of weeks ago actually, I got a text message from my friend, a guy called Tony Uddin, who's been on Crowd. He just moved house a couple of weeks ago. And when he moved house, he sent me that photo that you just saw because he's found, I think the only copy of that thing in the world which is promised to use as blackmail. So thanks, Tone. In fact, he and Ian Dowsett, who's also been on Crowd, were my best men. And you'll see in this photo, there's a copy of the book cover in front of them. They were using it in their best man speech. Let me tell you, there was banter, there was laughter. They ripped into me. And quite rightly so, if I'm honest with you, because I would have done exactly the same if it was them. But let me tell you, it was such a formative time for me because I had to really seriously rewire my thinking. God had to do a work in me about relationships. And that study, which lasted at least 2 years, that mini book, actually, as cheese-tastic as that book probably is, I don't read it now, it actually changed my life. So when Sharon and I met, the question wasn't whether I could marry her. I knew pretty quickly, actually, that I could. The question was whether I wanted to be in covenant with her. You know, you think about that question differently because a covenant is a laying down of your life for someone else. And it took me a few weeks to make that decision. Not because I was uncertain about my feelings, I was very certain about those, but because I understood the weight of what I was committing to. We didn't live together before we got married. We didn't have sex outside of marriage. We did it God's way. We did it the right way. And I knew that I was entering into a covenant, not a contract. And I knew that God had witnessed this whole thing. He witnessed our marriage. He'd got involved. And it was serious. And it was for the rest of our lives. And let me tell you, it was a great decision, right? Yeah. You sure? The best decision ever. Oh, yes. Now, I was not looking for a way out when we got married because I understood what I was getting into, right? It's really important. You don't look for a way out when you know what it is you're getting into. And I learned that how you see marriage, how you see relationships, how you see your spouse, how you see sex, all of that dictates very much how you approach it. So my testimony is simply this, that God took someone like me with broken thinking about marriage and about relationships and restored me. And I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am because after 27 years of marriage, just looking at you to check it's 27, I can tell you that is still a really, really wonderful thing. And not many people can say that. So, does not mean it is easy or perfect. Practicing Christians still have a divorce rate of about 20 to 25%, which is both sad and bad. It's not great, but couples who attend religious services regularly are 50% likely to divorce. So there's something in this, isn't there? So yes, there is still divorce in the church, but if you are active in your faith, that divorce rate halves. And there's a shift in culture too, which I find quite fascinating. So Gen Z, or Gen Z, do you know what's the right way to say it? Do you know? I don't know. In Gen Z, okay. Actually wants marriage. They want to get married more than millennials did. So 75% of Gen Z want to get married compared to only 43% of millennials. That's a big swing, isn't it? It seems like the new generation are not rejecting marriage, but rather this sort of broken version of marriage that maybe they've seen or tried to have been sold. So you know what? My 3 kids have grown up in a stable home. Well, stable as I can make it. More stable because of you rather than me, probably. They've seen a marriage that works not because we're perfect, although, you know, you're obviously very close, babe. But because we understand covenant, which means, men, in the covenant, in marriage, there is no room for porn, none whatsoever, because that breaks covenant. I keep short accounts with Sharon. We know our roles, our purpose, and our drive is to honor Christ and build his kingdom together. So marriage is not outdated, it is timeless. The problem isn't the institution. I think it's that maybe we've forgotten what it actually is. And when marriage becomes a covenant and not a contract, everything changes. Research even tells us that. Tells us, you know, if you're married, you're literally going to live longer and healthier lives. But that change starts with understanding that it isn't just about you or another person. It's about reflecting the eternal love between Christ and his church to a world that has maybe forgotten what real love looks like. So the question then isn't whether marriage is outdated or whether marriage actually is worth saving. The question is maybe, are you ready to discover what it was always meant to be? That's it.
Thank you for that. Can I just say I am very, very grateful for all the study that you've done with about marriage before we got married. And I'm also really grateful for the work that God did in my own life before we got together, because I think without that, we would have been an absolute disaster together between us and our stuff. But,
Yes.
Yeah, we would have, yeah. So I think that the talk, although we've been married 27 years, I love hearing about covenant again. And I think in that talk there was lots of challenge. And there was also lots that was really bumping heads with our culture. So, yeah. So I want to start this with Heather has... Oh, hi to everyone in the chat, by the way. We've got Heather, Matt, Aid, Jan. Hello, everybody. But Heather's put a really good point here. She said, are we differentiating between a Christian marriage in church versus a civil marriage versus living together? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. What we're talking about here is Christian marriage. So it's marriage for those who want to follow Jesus and want to follow the pattern that God has laid down. We're not talking about those outside the church, although I do believe that a lot of the principles are good for everybody. You got any thoughts on that?
No, I read that question and I thought, well, that's an easy answer. And then I thought, oh, what about if you've been married, let's say whether it was a church marriage or a civil marriage, then you both become Christians. You might have said those vows before God or before someone that, that's not a sort of religious or Christian. Is there a decision there that perhaps you should say to God, we didn't know quite what we were going into then. This is what we're going to do now. Perhaps it was legal back then, and now it's covenant. Now it's got something more than the legal tick.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that kind of touches on where Matt says that life actually is quite messy, isn't it? And yeah, I think there is that whole, okay, we've committed to this marriage on one set of understanding, but actually now that we're Christians, our understanding is changing and broadening or, deepening with what God intended it to be. And yeah, I think it's an exciting journey potentially.
Yeah, I think so. And I think perhaps that's, for me, one of the, apart from let's take God out of it. Oh, you see what I mean in a minute.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
The big thing with cohabiting and like living together and marriage is there's often not been a decision. There's been lots of little, oh, I like you, come back to mine, or stay over. Oh, my toothpaste is with you, and you've got to that stage, you're together, you might have kids, but you've never perhaps looked at each other and said, if we started this again, would I be with you? Would this decision be for life? And then we can put God back in and see what is, that it's a good idea what he's done, that we have to make that decision. And I think when you come to Christ, it might be that decision to make between each other. And perhaps not a decision, you're not going to break it, but to say to each other, this happened, but now let's take it forward into more.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to backtrack a little bit, if that's okay. So Matt started off by talking about how his experience growing up with his parents' divorce shaped his view of what marriage should be. I just wondered if you've got any thoughts on that for yourself.
Sorry, I was just reading my notes.
Okay, so how was your upbringing? How did your upbringing affect your view of marriage?
I had a really good upbringing. So I've been in sort of surroundings of marriage, a stable marriage. My dad was the pastor of a church. Those around him, I I don't know when I actually came across someone that had been divorced, just even in that circle of friends. So it wasn't something that I ever thought would happen. So that definitely affected my what I see. And I've had to have tricky conversations just recently with my kids, because around us they've seen marriages that aren't working. And I've had to say to them, marriages don't just fail. It's like Matt said, you can't be passive in a marriage. You've got to be active. That something's got to happen for it to fail, and happened for it to succeed. So I wanted to pass that on so they didn't see around that mine and Lisa's marriage was what they saw as stable, not what was going on around.
It's a really interesting point. There's a parable in the Bible. It's called the parable of the sower, right? And it talks about seed being sown, and it talks about the seed being God's word and how it bears fruit in our lives. And in that, it talks about how the deceitfulness of riches, the cares of this world, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word and make it unfruitful. And the analogy it gives is like weeds growing up around something that's fruitful. And so both are growing together, and eventually the weeds overcome it. That's a process, right? It's not like it just was really strong and fruitful and then the next day it wasn't. There's a process, there's a choking. And I think that's true of so many failed marriages. There's a process, like you say. And there's a process to successful marriages. And there's a process to marriages that fail. It's not an instant thing. So I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, I just want to say here as well that if you are someone who's divorced, please do not take this as condemnation in any way. That we will stand here as people saved by God's grace, and that, all of us have got stuff, and but that God is able to redeem situations and to bring good out of situations that might be really painful for you. So please don't take that as condemnation.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not perfect, and I would say, if your marriage is struggling, or even if it's just doing fine, get to know other solid married couples and chat with them and communicate. We had a tricky time in our marriage probably about 10 years ago, and Dave Connolly was speaking last week. We got him and his wife on the phone. We said, "You need to come over." We were cleaning the oven. That's what tipped it over. Cleaning the oven. Yeah, I can't even remember all the details now, but we're like, from this day on, we get someone to clean our oven now. It's like, that's a well worth expense. It
Top marriage tip there, ladies and gentlemen. You want to stay married longer, get someone in to clean your oven. The trip now is to try and find a Bible verse.
Yeah. I just say that was just for us. It was something that just tipped us over the edge, and we thought, we got a good, solid married couple to come over, and we just chatted through things, and the byproduct was, we move on, but someone else cleans our oven.
I think because that is the thing, isn't it? Like, God's plan for marriage is a fabulous one, but actually in reality sometimes it can be really difficult, and I think most marriages hit these really tricky patches that sometimes you need extra help to be able to get through them, not just to survive, but to actually deal with the issues going on so that you come out better, not so that you're just hanging on to a bad marriage for the sake of it, but so that you can thrive and actually have a fabulous marriage.
And that time it helped our marriage, because our communication was on a level which was okay, but sometimes both of us couldn't really talk about tricky things, so it didn't have that capability. And now it's got that capability to go right to the tricky stuff, because we know we can talk through it. So it was a hard time, but it was.
That's a really good point, because the resilience, I think, in marriage comes from dealing with the complicated situations well. Maybe the wrong word, but actually determining to get through them in a good way, and working through those builds resilience in your marriage. So communicating about the tricky stuff in a way that is you're talking about conflict, aren't you, in a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Did you know this?
I did know
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
yes.
So in a couple of weeks, we're going to get into conflict in marriage.
I
And
wonder
how
if that oven story might come up.
again. So yeah, we've got that in a couple of weeks. Basically, Dan's going to tell you how to argue well, is what's going to happen.
How to win? No.
And to win, yeah. Not if you're the husband. That's not the goal. But no, I think that like it's a really good point. Resilience is a really important thing. And so if you're facing stuff which is difficult or hard, it's not pleasant, but God will redeem that and can redeem that so that you come out of it together as a couple much stronger, right? I'm thinking of Stephen, who was on the What's the Story podcast. And if you've not listened to What's the Story, it's a podcast we've got on the Crowd Church website where we get people in we just talk to them about what their story is, about their Christian journey. And Stephen came on and he talked about how when his wife had an affair, they were young Christian couple and his wife had an affair. And he talks about God's redemption through that. And it's a remarkable story and one I would strongly encourage you to go and listen to. I just remember doing that interview with him and thinking, man alive, the grace of God is so strong, because they had one of the worst situations you face in marriage without any doubt. And they worked through it. That resilience has now built a much stronger marriage. And he tells you all about it in the story. So definitely check it out.
We've also got, I'm trying to remember his name, he's done talks for us, who's also been on What's the Story, Mark Buchanan, and he talks about how his marriage actually fell apart completely and didn't recover. So I think there's lots of different stories that I kind of encourage people, whatever situation you're going through right now in terms of marriage, there's something on there in What's the Story.
Yeah,
just going back to my original question, we've gone all like this, which is great, which was to do with our own experience. I've said this before on Crowd, but when I first came to Liverpool, I think I was 24 at the time, I remember coming into church and seeing a couple who were roughly the same age as me, but they'd been married for a year, and they looked like they still liked each other, and I was absolutely shocked. And I hadn't realised until that point that my expectation of marriage was that you found someone, you fell in love, you got married, and then you gradually hated each other more and more each year. Like, if you had actually asked me what I thought about marriage, I would have said something completely different. But I would have said, the biblically correct kind of stuff. But actually what was in my heart, what had crept in without me even knowing it, was something completely different. And I think, that was just that particular year, God just highlighted so much to me of what was actually in my heart. And it's just quite an interesting.
Well, I'm glad that changed.
Me too.
Yeah, because it was important that it changed.
Yeah, I think.
And actually, let me just one thing I want to say. Actually, if you are a younger person watching this, and you are not yet married, and you are entering into that sort of phase of life where you're going to start dating, or maybe you are already dating. We have had a spate recently of couples getting divorced, separating, who probably shouldn't have got married in the first place, right? Now, there's all kinds of things that we can talk about here, but just being totally real. What happened at the start of their relationship was that neither of them had the courage to break it off. Because at the time, there was very much this belief that if you're dating more than 6 months as a Christian, you probably ought to get married. And I don't think that's a particularly helpful way to think. Now, when we decided to get married, within 5 months? Yep. It was 5 months. So I did the exact opposite of what I've just said in many ways. And that's okay. I mean, we knew that we knew. I think what I'm saying to you is marriage is a covenant. It is lifelong. And I think in Christian circles, there can be a pressure to get married young if you date for a while. And I want you to be aware of that pressure. Because sometimes the hardest thing you can do is to break off that relationship if it's not right before God. And you go forward and you get married. And at that point, it's too late, because I don't think you can go to your spouse and go, we should never have got married in the first place, I'm off. I don't think that washes with God. I think once you're in, you make that marriage work, and we've had plenty of stories like that. But I think early on in your dating, I was going to say dating career, but actually it's the wrong phrase. In your dating life, I think just be really clear about what God is saying to you and what is pressure and from an outside culture. Because like I say, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is end the relationship, and your 40-year-old self will thank you for that. But like I say, once you're in, you are in. Now, there are some instances for divorce and separation, which is worth highlighting that Scripture talks about. We've mentioned this before on Crowd. There's abuse, there's adultery, and there's abandonment, the 3 A's. Abuse is an obvious one, and when I say abuse, I mean genuine abuse, not like, you didn't cook me my favourite fish and chips tonight, I'm off. Abandonment, is obviously clear, and adultery is clear. That doesn't mean that they instantly create divorce, but you could argue that there is scriptural grounds for divorce in that like God has said, okay, we can talk about this. So I think that's worth understanding, because I appreciate that divorce does happen in church, and it does happen for a number of reasons. And like Sharon said, we don't want to condemn anybody here, because God can redeem a whole great deal of things. So, whether you're in marriage and it's difficult, God can redeem that. Whether you're in a marriage and it's great, God can still do some cool stuff with that. Go and build God's kingdom together. If you're divorced, God can redeem that. If you're single, great, God can be in that. We're going to talk about singleness, I think, in the new year. From memory, I can't remember. It's coming up. I can't remember the exact schedule. But whatever state you find yourself in, whatever situation, I think God can be with you and God can redeem it.
And sorry, is that all right? We talked earlier about having, how you come where you are in your life with God and in that relationship. And I always remember friends of my parents in Birmingham, and they had an arranged marriage. So Indian had an arranged marriage, and they became Christians. And there'd been no dating, there'd been nothing like that. They were there because they were told to be, and they had kids. And they both became Christians. And the husband really prayed and said, God, I need to find love for my wife, because that's not why I was together. And he restored that or created it. And it's just a great story that I love to tell, because I think it's brilliant how God sees marriage and then helps you, work it out.
Yeah, I think in whatever situation there is that, just being honest before God, isn't there, and saying, God, this is where I'm at. I need your help. What do I do? Just thinking about Matt's advice to people who are maybe dating or whatever. I've got my own one as well to add. I think just because we have seen, like, over the years, different marriages fall apart, and obviously we don't know the ins and outs of all of it, but there are little trends that we kind of see. One of them Matt's already mentioned. I think another is where people are not communicating, like, what the issues are. So maybe they're upset by their spouse, or they're upset about something, but they keep it to themselves and they don't talk about it. Yeah. They don't resolve the issue, and then the issue just gets bigger and bigger, and they hold on to the unforgiveness, and then everything just gets seen in that light, and then it just becomes this massive thing. So I think I've seen God can overcome in us any issue if we're actually willing to put them out on the table, to say, God, this is the way it is, to be honest, to repent of our own stuff, to forgive the other person. But if we're not actually willing to do that, if you're with someone who's not willing to talk about that stuff, it's probably not going to work. You need someone who's, where both of you're going to talk about stuff as it comes up and not hang on to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've got another question.
Okay.
I've got a whole list here. I'm just working through, just checking on the time. Yeah, we're okay. So, what things about Christian faith in particular would you say help a marriage thrive?
Oh, that's a
Who
good
would like to
question.
take that one?
Forgiveness would be the obvious one. Not that I ever need to forgive you of anything, sweetheart. But I feel like it's going to be the other way around a lot. Like, the feminine. So I think practicing forgiveness is a big thing, isn't it? You can't hold on to stuff. You have to, we joke about this, don't we? In that quite early on in our marriage, we read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I think we read a page. It's not particularly a Christian book, but
it's
it
not
had some useful stuff.
Yeah. It does have some useful stuff, doesn't it? And the concept of the book was basically men and women speak different languages. And so men speak Martian, women speak Venusian, I guess. I don't know what you speak in Venus. And so you speak different languages, and so you end up doing this a lot. And the most useful page in that entire book was a table which says, this is what a woman says, this is what a woman means, and this is what a man hears. And all of them were different, right? And it was the same the other way around. This is what a man says, this is what a man means, this is what the woman hears, right? They were all different. And so quite early on in our marriage, we would often do this thing where you would say something and I would just go quiet and Sharon would just look at me and go, are you translating right now? Because I'm trying to take what I heard and I'm trying to go through this thinking which goes, this is actually what she meant and it's different to what I heard. And I think when you walk in that attitude of forgiveness, when you walk in that attitude of this person is my life partner and I've got, I think nothing but the best of them and they've got my highest best at heart, they might not communicate it in that instance. So therefore, what I've heard might not be what was intentionally communicated. And I think that really helped us.
It really, really did, yeah. We did a lot of translating, I think, in the early days. I remember after having several of these incidences where I would say something and Matt would, it was just like the wall had gone up. And I'd be like, I've obviously not said, I've not communicated well what I mean, because that wasn't the reaction I was expecting. I remember just spending time before I then said, in future occasions, if I was upset about something, I would just take myself off for a while and go, okay, this is how I'm feeling. How can I communicate this in a way that he's actually going to understand it? And it did take quite a long practice, didn't it, just to try and communicate in a way that we would understand and wouldn't just get each other's backs up all the time.
Yeah, been there too. And also the tone of how you say something. Still learning that one, but I'm getting a bit better.
And I think that's relevant not just to marriage, is it, but just to any relationship, because all of us, we all come from different places, we all think slightly differently, so it's like communicate. The scope for miscommunication is quite huge, so we need to work on it.
And I think sometimes marriage can be looked at like it's just a challenge because there's two different types of people, different people. And on some levels it is, but it's also amazing because I can do things that Lisa can't, and Lisa can do things that I can't, and together we can do things that we couldn't do on our own. And it's great that's what a marriage is. It's something that we've both got different skills and traits.
Yeah.
That too often it is, isn't it? Like, it's two people don't get on together, or they're trying to do things different. They're trying to pull away.
Yeah.
Pull together. It's great.
Yeah, I love that. It's not a challenge you have to over. I mean, there are challenging times.
Yeah.
But it's not like, it's not when Paul said, I've got a thorn in my flesh, he wasn't referring to his wife, right? It's not that kind of thing. And I think when you look back at the dawn of time, God said it's not good for man to be alone. As in, everything was good, right? This was paradise, and God went, I can take this up a notch. I'm going to give him a wife. And I think actually that is the understanding that you have, that life can be good here, and if God calls you to singleness, that's perfect, that's brilliant. But if he calls you into marriage, that's going to make you it's going to take you from good to very good, right? It's that kind of thing, isn't it, where, especially men, it's not good that men are alone. Men spending time on their own for long periods of time, I don't care what anyone says, 98% of the time it's not good, genuinely speaking. And if you're doing that, if you're spending all your time on computer games by yourself, Yeah, I think you need to get out into community because you're going to be watching porn. Not all of you, but do you know what I mean? There's all kinds of stuff going on there, and it's just not good to be alone. Get in community, get out there. Even if you're not dating, even if you're not married, just go and be with people because it's not good for men to be alone.
And just on that topic before we finish, one of the great things about that marriage and being different, and then marriage often has kids and you've got to have that different role, is that it spills over into life, doesn't it? It has equipped me better to deal with people I work with, to deal with customers, because they're different to me. They don't understand what I'm saying. I have to convey it, and I've learned that through marriage and through those situations. It's not something that is just standalone.
Yeah.
I was just going back to the question about how Christian faith can help build good marriages, and I think covenant is a massive one for me. Probably don't have, Matt did talk about it, but don't have masses of time to properly get into that.
There's a great talk on the Crowd Church archive about covenant. Great talk. One of the best you'll ever hear.
Matt did that a few weeks ago. But there's this whole thing for me. I'm trying to find, I've got all these notes written. I'm just trying to find the bit now where Paul in Ephesians 5:31-32, I think it is, quotes back to Genesis, talking about marriage, and then says this is referring to the mystery of Christ and the church. And the Bible opens with the marriage of Adam and Eve, and it finishes with the marriage, which is talking about the marriage between Jesus and his bride, the church. And it's got loads about marriage all in it. And part of the reason for marriage is as a reflection of this relationship between Jesus and his church, of that whole mutually serving each other, that commitment for life, that laying down your life for each other. And I think that that whole image of marriage being an image of something higher, I think that just helps me as well. It's not just like this little institution down on earth, but it's pointing to a deeper spiritual truth and a calling. And I can't get all my words out. It's big. And I think that having that something beyond just what you are and the help of God, the Holy Spirit, that just makes a massive difference. I'm aware we're really running out of time now. Have either of you got anything just quickly to add before we finish?
I think if you're in a marriage and you're thinking, can I do this? What is my responsibility? Go and listen to that talk of Matt's, because just that legal and covenant. Legal, we can think we just need a lawyer to get out of it, or what caveat or what clause can I use? Covenant is very different, and it gives you that. Let's work at this.
Yeah, and we could talk about this for hours, and in fact, we're going to talk about it next week and the week after. So, let me give a quick plug for next week. We are talking about perhaps some of the most controversial aspects of marriage next week, roles. So we're getting into headship and submission. What is that all about? Does the Bible really talk about that? So we are going to get into that next week, which I'm really looking forward to, because I love the controversial topics. I'm not going to lie, that's why they're good fun. So we're going to get into that next week, and then, like I say, the week after, we've got Dan talking about conflict and resolution. So we've got the little mini marriage course, I suppose, in the whole relationship series. And so, that's my plug over.
Lovely. Well, I think we will finish it there for tonight then. Hope to see you next week. If you want to connect with us now, straight after this, where are we meeting? It's coming up on the screen, Google Meets. You can join us there just for a quick chat, say hi. Other than that, if you could join us next week, that would be fabulous. Hope that you have an amazing week. Goodbye. Thank you.